What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a jam-packed show, as we have quite a bit of volleyball to get into, such as loads of upsets happening. Teams such as Towson, LMU, Northwestern, even Stanford have been pulling off upsets. Quite a big week from those teams last week. And the Big Ten has been all over the place. Wisconsin's pulling off wins. Like I said, Northwestern was pulling off big wins. We also had Nebraska pulling off a couple big wins. Also had some nationally televised volleyball. Have a little bit of a little angry rant to get into. We also had some beach volleyball happening. As also we had the AVP release its Phoenix Championship brackets. Who's in it? And who will be the top 6 to beat in the tournament? So hand me a volleyball. Set for next. Because I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. I hope you all are having a good Monday afternoon, Monday evening, Monday wherever you are listening from. Either way, you have made yourself into episode 159 of Set Point. Without any further delay, let's get on into this volleyball action. But first and foremost, IE Sports Radio is what is making Set Point happen, as it is our platform that we go live with, and without it, we wouldn't be going live today. So, IE Sports Radio can be found on major streaming platforms on social media, such as Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Just type in the word IE, then sports, then radio, and then you'll be able to find IE Sports Radio. IE Sports Radio is also available on Facebook, even though most people don't really use it, as you just got to type in the word IE, then sports, then radio. Also, we have a Patreon link at our website, www.iesportsradio.com. And when, like I said, you go to our website, you just got to click to the top of the page, and you'll see a Patreon link. And once you click it, it starts out at $5 a month for donations. This is going to get a shout from every show, including this one. And higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to our podcasting university, ISRU, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment with Larry B. Thank you to everyone for all of your support, and thank you to everyone for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. Big shout to our Patreon supporters, Bay Area Raised Apparel, Marcus Los Great, Key to the Gate, and a donor that wishes to remain anonymous. And without any further delay, let's jump on into some volleyball action. So, like I said, I cover all things volleyball. Everyone's probably thinking, okay, NCAA volleyball's happening first. Nope. We're going to jump on into some beach volleyball that happened. We had quite a bit of beach volleyball news to go over, as well as some FIVB news, or international volleyball happening. But first, let's get into some NCAA beach volleyball news. Yes, there is some NCAA beach volleyball news, and I am kicking myself for forgetting this from last week's show. So, I just realized that Texas University has added a beach volleyball program. For me, I think that's huge, not only for the sport of volleyball, for beach volleyball, but it's also huge for the University of Texas. I really think that's starting to become a bigger volleyball school. You obviously have TCU, which was basically kind of the selling point of like Texas beach volleyball. TCU obviously has a great program, lots of great talent on that team, and they've had great history, including this year, even though their run in the NCAA tournament was kind of shortened. But either way, having Texas beach volleyball is big time right there, especially since indoor Texas volleyball is just as huge. Like, it's really huge, and now there are going to be more people compelled to go into beach volleyball when it comes to attending the University of Texas, and it just won't be TCU or the California schools or any of that sort. I think University of Texas is going to find a way to give TCU and all those other big-time beach volleyball programs a run for their money when it comes to getting the top recruits, because volleyball is also big in Texas as well, indoor and beach volleyball, and I think the youth, when it comes to making their selection in terms of schools where they want to commit to, is going to have quite the decision on their hands of attending the dream school, that is the big-time volleyball school of Texas, or attending other schools. Like, for example, Nebraska also has beach volleyball as well. Yes, I am not kidding. Nebraska has beach volleyball. Last year, they were kind of in the infancy stages. They didn't have, like, they didn't play like the nationally ranked teams like the USCs, the Florida States, the UCLAs. They kind of just were in its infancy stages. Soon, it's eventually going to grow and become a hot spot for the Midwest. Just because there is no Ohio State or Wisconsin beach volleyball or Penn State beach volleyball or any of that other sort. Even though Penn State is more up east, but I digress. And there's also no Indiana beach volleyball. So I think beach volleyball is starting to become more popular when it comes to college volleyball, and I think it's huge, and I'm glad we got to see Texas expand when it comes to getting more volleyball. It's not just going to be indoor volleyball, like it's going to be beach volleyball in the springtime, and I think it's a great thing, and TCU better watch out, because some of those recruits, those beach volleyball recruits in the state of Texas, might be thinking about going to the Longhorn State or the Longhorn University versus the Horned Frog University. So we'll see. All right, that's kind of my little take on Texas beach volleyball happening. I think it's great for the sport of volleyball just because, like I said, it gives more variety in these volleyball schools like Texas and Nebraska. USC is a big-time beach volleyball school, having won back-to-back national championships. UCLA has been big time, and Florida State was the runner-up last year. So overall, I think beach volleyball, in terms of the NCAA, is growing, and I can't wait to see what team gets another beach volleyball program next. So that's going to be that for NCAA beach volleyball discussion. It was just a little brief tidbit or nugget. Jumping on over to some other beach volleyball, we have the AVP and its Phoenix Championships bracket being released. So it's just, like I said last week, it's just a 6-team bracket. It's just only 6 pairs just participating. That's pretty much it. And it's just going to be for 2 days. It's going to be on the 23rd and the 24th. So it's not going to start this Friday and Saturday, but it's going to start next Friday and Saturday. And that's going to be big time just because I really can't wait to see what the Phoenix Championships has in store. I really think any of those pairs can possibly win the Phoenix Championships. Not just on the women's side, but on the men's side as well. Jumping over to the men's bracket, we have as the number 1 seed, Trevor Crabb and Tri Bourne, and the number 2 seed is Theo Brunner and Chaim Schulk. So those 2 pairs that I just mentioned are the number 1 and 2 seed, and they get a first-round bye. And it looks like it's just a single elimination bracket. It's kind of like the NWSL playoffs. Basically, it's just the top 6. Number 1 and number 2 seed get the first round bye into the semifinals. And then 3 through 6 face off against one another. So as for the number 3 seed taking on the number 6 seed, that happens to be Taylor Crabb and Taylor Sander, as I call them, Team Taylor, as the number 3 seed. And the number 6 seed that they're facing is Troy Field and Chase Budinger. Yes, the Chase Budinger, that just so happened to be an former NBA player, as Davidson Crooks is in the chat room. He says, what's good? Just talking some beach volleyball to start out, just because I talk all things volleyball. I don't just talk about NCAA. I don't just talk about the AVP. I talk everything volleyball. I talk a little high school volleyball as well, but I digress. Anyway, back to the Phoenix Men's Bracket Championship on the AVP side. So Taylor Sander and Taylor Crabb take on Chase Budinger and Troy Field in the first quarterfinal. The other quarterfinal will consist of Paul Lottman and Miles Partain taking on Phil Dalhauser and Casey Patterson. Now, this matchup is quite interesting. I think Phil Dalhauser and Casey Patterson could be a matchup problem for Paul Lottman and Miles Partain. Granted, Lottman is a veteran, but Partain is still fairly young to the AVP scene. And Phil Dalhauser and Casey Patterson, well, mainly Phil Dalhauser, is a living legend. Like, that dude is quite amazing. So I'm really going to be interested to see how Paul Ottman and Miles Partain do against Dalhauser and Patterson. And remember, it looks like this is just going to be a single elimination. So once you lose, you go bye-bye. Because it's only 16 bracket. Like, there's no point of having a loser's bracket and then an eventual champion, because then we'd have to push it to like another day. We'd rather just get the whole tournament over with. And then Taylor Crabb and Taylor Sander taking on Troy Field and Chase Budinger is going to also be interesting. I feel Team Taylor is going to just roll to victory, but I would not be so sure. Troy Field and Chase Budinger are both really good. Not really good, but they're both decent. I don't think they're both bad at all. Otherwise, they would not have made the top 6. And furthermore, I really think that it's going to be an interesting quarterfinal. Like I said, no pair is safe when it comes to the Phoenix Championships. And I think it's up for grabs. Anyone could probably win. So we'll see. Jumping over to the women's bracket, the number 1 and number 2 seed consist of Sarah Hughes and Kelly Kalinsky as the number 1 seed, and then Therese Cannon and Sarah Sponsel as the number 2 seed. Those two have gotten an automatic access to the semifinals, so they basically have a quarterfinal bye. So we won't have to see them until the semifinals. As for the 3, 4, 5, and 6 seed, the 3 seed consists of Kelly Cheng and Betsy Flint, as they will take on Zana Muno and Sarah Pavin. So that's going to be an interesting quarterfinal, just because Muno and Pavin, they have a little bit to prove, as they were the last one in. And they take on a very talented Kelly Cheng and Betsy Flint pair, as I think that one, on paper, it looks like Cheng and Flint could win that one easy, as they just came off of a third-place finish in the Chicago Open. But I would not count out Zana Muno and Sarah Pavin. I really think that those two are going to probably fight tooth and nail. I feel that Zana Muno has drastically improved, and having Sarah Pavin is going to be quite nice. I really think that the 3 versus 6 matchup is, on paper, it's kind of a mismatch, but at the same time, I really think that it's going to be a barn burner in that first quarterfinal. The other quarterfinal consists of Taryn Cloth and Kristen Nuss as the number 4 seed, and Julia Scholes and Gina Yarango as the number 5 seed. So this is the battle of the 4 versus 5 seed, and this is going to be a great battle. So Taryn Cloth and Kristen Nuss are basically the young kids on the block. They're kind of the newcomers. They're like the second-year pair, as they haven't really partaken in too many AVP events, and they've won 2 AVP events this year. And in addition, they needed to finish first in the Chicago Open in order to make the playoffs, and they were able to do so. So the fact that they were able to win that tournament, considering they needed first place, it was either first place or bust in order to make the playoffs or the Phoenix Championships, speaks to high volumes of how this pair has grown. They've gone through their ups and downs, and remember, Cloth and Nuss even lost a match in the Phoenix Championships, but they were able to rebound and eventually win out the rest of the way through the contenders bracket, and now they're in the Phoenix Championships. So as for Julia Scholes and Gina Yarango, so they I feel they were a wild card because they were kind of the last 2 in. Cloth and Nuss, as well as Cheng and Flint, Sponsel and Cannon, and Hughes and Kalinsky were all locks to make the Phoenix Championship. But the 2 wild cards were basically Zana Muno and Sarah Pavin, and Julia Scholes and Gina Yarango. So Yarango obviously has been more experienced when it comes to the AVP. Scholes is still a little bit on the young side, but she has a lot of volleyball IQ just because she has played a lot of college volleyball, and she just recently came off of a tournament which she basically got to represent the U.S., but more on that later. For this matchup, I think it's going to be a battle of how far Teran Rodriguez and Kristen Nuss have come when it comes to their whole beach volleyball experience in the AVP. I think they do have a shot against Scholes and Urango, just because obviously Urango is kind of the more experienced player, and Julia Scholes she's been all over the place. She's been through indoor, and then she played beach at Hawaii, then beach at USC, and now she's pretty much going to do it big professionally. So I'm going to be interested to see how that matchup turns out. I would not be surprised if that went the distance. I really think that matchup could go the distance. And whoever wins this 4 versus 5 matchup, I don't think is going to give the number 1 team an easy time. I really think that Cloth and Nuss or Scholes and Urango could possibly upset the number 1 seed. Just because when it comes to the AVP, all bets are off. Unless you really are good with predicting the AVP and beach volleyball in general, nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed. And I guarantee you that all these pairs could win the AVP tournament in the Phoenix Championships. I really think the Phoenix Championships is basically all bets are off. I know it's just 6 teams and it's just a 1 in 6 chance, but I still think that any of these pairs could win this whole shebang. And this is kind of I want to say this is basically like the playoffs, and it's basically for like the championship, and once you win, you basically make history. Because this is kind of the first time the AVP has expanded its season. It used to be just 3 tournaments, and now they've expanded it to like multiple tournaments, not just for like the Gold Series, but for like the Pro Series and the Tour Series. But after this is basically the last Gold Series event. After the Gold Series event, it's all gone, it's all done, and that's it. So like I said, everything starts on September 23rd and 24th, which is a Friday and a Saturday. Like I said, it's basically going to be a barn burner. And with how hot it is in Phoenix, I would not be surprised if basically the heat was turned up to 11 when it comes to these fire matchups. Not just on the women's side, but the men's side as well. I really think that both brackets are not going to disappoint. And I would not be surprised if the 2 pairs that got buys basically fell in the semifinals. Like, anything is bound to happen. It could be the 1 seed versus the 2 seed, or the 5 seed versus the 6 seed, or any of that sort. All I just know is that there's not going to be a consolation bracket. So, there's that. So that is going to do it for the AVP portion of the show. It's nothing to really talk too much about. All I'm just basically giving you all is the information for the Phoenix Championships. That's basically it until the week of the Phoenix Championships, where basically I'll try to get into the nitty-gritty, but overall I think it's pretty much straightforward. Basically it's single elimination, and once you win the championship, then it's the greatest feeling in the world. Whereas you don't want to lose anywhere down the road. It's basically win or go home now, quite literally. So to close out the beach volleyball portion of the show, I do need to discuss the FISU World Championship. So this basically happened last week. This basically went all the way it started on September 6th all the way to September 10th, and it was quite the interesting little tournament, to be exact. I didn't even know this was a thing until I found out the FISU was somewhat a thing, as basically the U.S. had like 3 pairs, 3 on the women's side, 3 on the men's side. Let's just say the ones on the men's side weren't as successful, but the ones on the women's side were fairly successful, honestly, as I feel you'll see. But as for the women's side of things, Haley Harward and Julia Scholes represented the U.S., and they actually won the whole thing. I am not kidding you. They won the whole thing, which was incredible, and I didn't think it would be... I knew they had a chance, as according to the U.S. Beach Volleyball website, they actually dropped a match in pool play, as according to this, on the women's side of things, they actually lost to Brazil in pool play, which I kind of find a little surprising. They went 1-1. They defeated a pair from Portugal, but then lost to a pair from Brazil in 3 sets. So that was that little matchup right there, and they basically just had to win out, as basically they kind of did, as they managed to defeat a pair from Canada the next day, and then they also... Yeah, they beat the pair from Canada, and then they also defeated... They continued their winning ways, and they eventually made their way to the semifinals as they defeated Australia in the quarterfinals in 3 sets, with the third set being 15-13. I tried to find the entire recap of their matches, but I could not find any of these for the love of me, which was very frustrating. It's like, how do you not post the results for everything? I'm basically having to look on the U.S. Beach Volleyball Twitter account for all of the all of Julia Scholes and Haley Harward's results, and it's kind of frustrating. It really kind of is, as in the semifinals, Julia Scholes and Haley Harward defeated Australia, and I guess they also defeated Germany, which I don't know what happened about that, but either way, they made it to the semifinals. As actually the pair for Germany actually withdrew due to injury, as the other pair from the U.S. The U.S. actually had 2 pairs make it to the semifinals, with the latter 2, not Julia Scholes and Haley Harward, losing, as it was Lexi Denneberg and I forget the other pair, as either way, Anderson and Denneberg lost, but that's all right, as Julia Scholes and Haley Harward eventually made it to the finals, and they eventually won the gold as they took down a pair from Spain in straight sets, 21-16 and 21-10. So overall, it was a great tournament for the U.S., as I was quite impressed. So this goes back to what I said about Julia Scholes having a lot of experience. So Julia Scholes has entered quite a number of tournaments. She won an AVP tournament with Gina Yarongo, and now she wins this tournament with Haley Harward. And this just goes to show that Julia Scholes has loads of experience, despite just finishing up college. Julia Scholes and Gina Yarongo are going to be a pair to watch for in the Phoenix Championships. And they're not going to be the standard 5 seed. This is going to be a 5 seed that could give a young pair that is a 4 seed some fits. But I really think Julia Scholes, if you know her story, it's quite amazing, as she was a standout at North Carolina. She looked like she was going to be the National Freshman of the Year, and then concussions kind of derailed that little campaign. And she eventually stopped playing beach volleyball just because the injuries and concussions were kind of mounting up. So she eventually stopped playing indoor volleyball. She eventually transferred and moved on to play beach volleyball at Hawaii. Then she transferred from there, and I think she played her senior year at USC, and that was the year USC won the national championship against UCLA. And then she utilized her 5th year to basically come back and basically win another championship with USC from last year. As we welcome Courtney Harden in the chat room, in the Spreaker chat room. He says it's been too long. It has been too long. But I'm glad you were joining in. Just talking some beach volleyball. So back to Julia Skulls, I really think that she's come a long way, and her story is quite amazing, having to rise above concussions and injuries from the indoor game to basically adapting well on the beach volleyball side of things, and now she's basically turning herself into a household name when it comes to beach volleyball. I really think that it's quite inspiring, and it just goes to show that sometimes you could turn a bad situation into a blessing in disguise, and I think that she and Gina Yarongo are going to be quite the pair to watch for in the AVP. As for Haley Harward teaming up with Julia Skulls, it's quite amazing just because I've covered Haley Harward back in her days at Long Beach State. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see her in her beach volleyball days back at Long Beach State, nor did I cover her at USC. But she did get to play indoor volleyball at Long Beach State, and she got to play a bunch of positions. She got to want to play mainly libero, but she also got to play defensive specialist. She got to play outside hitter, even though she's not quite 5 feet. But honestly, she has been all over the place, and I'm glad she's finding her footing, especially when it comes to like the pro volleyball circuit. In the AVP, she did win one of the AVP tournaments along with her college volleyball partner, Tina Gradina. In addition, Haley Harward and Tina Gradina were both named the AVCA Pair of the Year in beach volleyball last spring, as both those two were basically a force to be reckoned with when it came to USC and NCAA beach volleyball. So for Haley Harward, this is no surprise, and the fun fact about Haley Harward and Julia Skulls is that they're both roommates, and they both mesh well with one another. They both have like this family-like bond, and it's quite nice, honestly. I really think that these two, if they decide to pair again, they have that cohesion. They have that team family spirit, and they basically have that connection with one another, that they have each other's back. But if they do go their separate ways, then in terms of like beach volleyball, then honestly, they had a great run, and I think they're going to do great in terms of other beach volleyball. But I think it's quite amazing that they won this whole tournament. And according to the USA volleyball website, it did indicate that Brazil beat them in pool play. But that's the beauty of like this whole tournament. You could lose once in like pool play, but as long as you like finish in the top two, I think it's top two, if not, it depends on the number of players in the pool, as it looks like it's basically a 3-team pool, as Skulls and Harward split their day, while Hodel and Van Winden won a match, and then they lost a match. So they split their day as well. So basically, it's all basically a numbers game, as you basically could be the top seed from that pool, or you could basically be the outside looking in pair in pool play. But either way, Julia Skulls and Haley Harward were incredible when it came to the FISU Beach Volleyball Championship, and I'm excited to see what's in store for them going forward. So on the men's side of things, when it came to the FISU Beach Volleyball Championship, that the pair that won was according to the FISU Beach Volleyball website. It was a pair from Portugal that won the FISU, as they defeated Switzerland in the final. As I'm gonna probably butcher these guys' name. I'm not even going to pronounce that first name. Pedroza and Hugo Campos defeated Emmanuel Zorker and Jonathan Jordan in the final, as the final actually went 3 sets, but unfortunately the FISU website does not give out the 3-set scores, which is disappointing, but it's all good. So congratulations to the pair from Portugal for winning the FISU Beach Volleyball Championship. And that's pretty much it when it comes to all the beach volleyball talk. I won't be getting into more beach volleyball talk until next week. And then when that happens, it's basically going to be the finale of beach volleyball until basically the week after the AVP. But overall, that's for another day. But either way, that is going to do it for the beach volleyball portion of this show. I want to jump into some NCAA volleyball action, but we won't right away. We're actually going to take ourselves a quick little commercial break. When we come back, then we'll jump on into some NCAA beach volleyball. I'll give out my team of the week. I'll give out my stat stuff for awards. And we have a lot of upsets to get into, so I might not be able to break down each and every one, but I'll do my best to at least make note of all of them. There's a lot of upsets. Either way, you are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hey sports fans, do you like wine? Well, we've got the show for you. This is Let's Wine About Sports, a show where we talk about wine and sports simultaneously. From the classic Cabernet Sauvignon all the way down to the grapes that you've never even heard of before. Oh yeah, we cover it all. And we'll talk about a little bit of sports as well. Football, hockey, collegiate, women's sports, it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about it all, and we're going to whine about it all. So join me Monday at 8 p.m. on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Check out all of our amazing shows, such as Chi-Town Weekly with Adam Karnick. He talks all things Chicago sports. We also have The Show That Never Sleeps with Harrison Glazer and Pierre Moss. And we also have Let's Whine About DMV Sports with Mike Pat, as he talks all things DMV sports while enjoying a glass of wine. Also check out The Show That Never Sleeps with Harrison Glazer and Pierre Moss. They talk all things New York sports. Let's get on into segment number 2 of Set Point as we welcome Larry B. as he says good evening, as well as Cale Henderson, who also says good evening. Cale, it's actually good that he's in the chat room because, oh boy, I've got a little something I have to get off my chest. So this past week, I think this was on Wednesday, and I basically, this past Wednesday, gather around everybody, this is story time with Teran. So this past Wednesday, I finally got to watch nationally televised NCAA volleyball. And it was actually a great matchup. It wasn't just like a throwaway matchup. It was another great matchup. It wasn't as big as Ohio State versus Texas, but it was quite big. It was Nebraska versus Creighton. This actually took place at the CHI Arena. And I didn't know it was pronounced the CHI Arena or Sports Center. Either way, it's not the Chi Arena, it's the CHI Arena. But either way, it was played in Creighton's home gymnasium, though it was kind of mostly a home game for Nebraska. It was basically like how the Raiders take over the Chargers' home games. But I digress. This isn't football, we're talking about volleyball. Okay, so this little matchup right here, indeed it was a good matchup. As the first set, I'm just going to I got to watch this on FS1. Nebraska was just pulverizing Creighton for the most part. It was basically a work of art, as Creighton was just, they didn't have an answer for Nebraska starting out, as Creighton got rolled in the first set. The second set was a little bit closer, but Creighton just could not keep up with Nebraska's big-time pin hitters. Then the third set, Creighton started playing better, as they almost lost, as they had to dodge a couple match points, or one match point from Nebraska, but then Creighton was able to take the third set. In the fourth set, now this is where it gets good. So this is the kicker. Everyone, listen, guys. So in the fourth set, Creighton was actually winning throughout most of the set. Nebraska was doing all it can to nibble away at the lead, but then Creighton was vastly closing in on winning the fourth set, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be a fifth set thriller. But then, near the end of the fourth set, I get this message on TV saying that due to the next event coming up, which was basically MLB baseball, this game is going to be moved to FS2. The problem is, now that's no problem for those that don't have FS2, but for those that do have FS2, but for those that don't have FS2, like myself, it's a big problem. So I just really wanted to see how the fourth set was going to turn out. But as the fourth set was nearing its climax, boom, FS1 turns it to the pregame show for MLB baseball between the Arizona Diamondbacks and the San Diego Padres. Okay, I was not thrilled, to say the least. I really was not happy that FS1 had to switch to its up-and-coming event. I get it, MLB is more popular than NCAA volleyball, but this is the only time I get to watch NCAA volleyball nationally televised, and FS1 had to change it. I was not thrilled. At first I thought it was just a regional thing, but then someone else in Indiana said, I got the same thing. FS1 changed the volleyball match to the pregame baseball show. And I was just livid. It's like, guys, come on, really? I understand this is the first world problems of not having FS2, but still, not everyone can have all these channels. Not everyone can have the Pac-12 network, the Big Ten network, the ACC network, FS2. I don't get all those sort of things. So I was not happy. It's like, who wants to watch the Diamondbacks versus the Padres? It's like, I really, really, really was not pleased with that. I was not happy by any what's the word? Any way, shape, or form. I just was pissed, to say the least. I really, really could not stand that whole little thing. I really was about to just scream, but it's like, dude, I don't get to watch a whole lot of college volleyball on TV. Sometimes we'll get the rarely televised matchup on ESPN or ESPN2, or we'll get the rarely televised matchup on FS1. Unfortunately, they decided to cut it while the match was getting really good. It's like, why can't you just let us be, dude? It's like, who cares if we're missing part of the baseball game? It's like... And Kale said it best. MLB is so trash now. I could not agree with you more. I'm not trying to make a dig that MLB is better, but I really would rather watch NCAA volleyball than watch baseball. Just because this is no dig against baseball, it's so slow, and it's like, I want to watch fast-paced volleyball. Like, please, FS1, give me one reason why I shouldn't scream and tear your heads off. I'm just saying, y'all, it's very frustrating. Because the match was getting good. It was about to go to a fifth set. Creighton eventually won the fourth set. But in the end, Nebraska won the fifth set and won 3-2. Sorry to those that didn't get to... Sorry if I had to basically spoil the ending. But honestly, Nebraska won. They just basically took over the fifth set, and that was that. But I was not happy with how FS1 changed the volleyball matchup to baseball. It's like... And who wants to watch a pregame baseball show? Like, why not axe the pregame baseball show and just move the baseball game to FS2, and then when it's done, move it back to FS1. Let us have our volleyball. Like, I'm willing to bet that the viewers on FS2 outdid the viewers on FS1 in terms of the whole baseball game. The whole baseball game. It's like, I was not pleased. I really wasn't. And it just didn't sit well with me, dude. I really want to file a complaint to FS1, but that's kind of my own first world problems with not having FS2. But again, it's like, I didn't think that this was going to happen. I think they were just under the assumption that they were basically going to have a quick 3-set match and then poof, that's it. We get to watch baseball. But that was not the case. It was the case of Creighton and Nebraska had a thriller with it going 5, and unfortunately FS1 users who didn't have FS2 basically could not watch it. And it's downright disappointing, and I'm just not pleased. And Kale says, just not fun to watch anymore. Want proof? Look at stadiums. They're nearly empty most of the time. MLB is just how it's described. America's pastime. Yeah, America's pastime. And he spelled it past time, and I totally get that. That's kind of the kicker right there. And I couldn't agree more. Like, I want to watch something fast-paced. And with how volleyball is growing in terms of not only the high school scene, but the college scene, and eventually the professional scene, it's basically growing at a rapid rate. So the fact that FS1 basically cut this really is a kick to the face when it comes to FS2 non-users. So that really did not sit well with me. And honestly, I want to complain more, but it's like, I don't think anyone wants to actually see that. And I didn't want to make a fool of myself, but it is what it is, and I'll survive. But overall, I missed a thriller of a 5-set match, even though it was basically mostly Nebraska, I wouldn't say dominating the 5th set. It was just like, I wish I could have seen it to like describe the emotions of it, because I hear that it was Kale with his one comment. I'll read it a little bit later, but it was just basically tight throughout the first half of the 5th set, and then Nebraska just pulled away. It's like a tug of war. In the end, Nebraska just pulled its way, and it basically won. Kale says, hockey doesn't get enough love either. Talk about fast-paced. Yeah, that too. It's like, and even Adam Karnick said in his little commercial that Hockey is not everyone's first sport, but he and Zach Puplis definitely try to make hockey everyone's first sport. And Cale says he watches volleyball for obvious reasons. So anyway, something I normally have when it comes to another one of my shows, the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, I have the Dum Dum of the Week. And this past week, I did not do I didn't have a segment of Dum Dum of the Week for my other show, but for FS1, that made me heartbroken, that decided to change the volleyball match that I never get to really watch on a weekly or daily basis, either because A, I'm super busy, or B, I just don't get it nationally. You are this week's Dum Dum of the Week. So FS1, take this honor with dignity and shove it up your television stream. Wait! My guy! You gotta talk to the people really quick.
You're so dumb. You are really dumb, for real.
That's basically the sound effect I use for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show when I have my Dum Dum of the Week segment. But FS1 is the Dum Dum of the Week. I'm sorry to all FS1 supporters, but I am disappointed. I am dissatisfied. I hate how FS1 decided to take the volleyball goodness away. I rarely get to watch nationally televised volleyball, but that's just me. Alright, so with that all said and done, that rant is officially over. I'm sorry to those whose feelings I hurt, if I did hurt any feelings, but that's just my little take on FS1 turning the volleyball match and moving it to FS2, which eventually it did get the viewers that it got from FS1, but I really want to see the viewers from the Diamondbacks Padres baseball game. If that had fewer views than the volleyball match on FS2, FS1 really done screwed up. Anyway, so that is that for that my little rant right there. Now let's jump on into the recap of NCAA women's volleyball matches for Week 3. So we had a lot of upsets, and I don't even know if I've gotten them all. The first upset we had occurred on Thursday as UCLA, number 22 ranked UCLA, fell to LMU, Loyola Marymount, and this was played at the Albert Gersten Pavilion as... Unfortunately for UCLA fans, the matches were supposed to be slated to play at UCLA, and then it eventually got moved to LMU for reasons. They never really gave a specific reason. I want to say it might have had something to do with like the heat or the air quality. I don't know, but either way, LMU, Loyola Marymount swept UCLA 26-24, 25-20, and 25-19. The big thing that I took away from this match was that LMU outblocked UCLA as a team by a grand total of 14.5-5. That is way too much, if you ask me, for LMU, as UCLA only hit 29 on... they had a percentage of under 0%. They hit .029. When you're hitting that low... That's when you know you have offensive issues. UCLA had offensive issues going into the season without Mac May, who they graduated. But they didn't have Charity Looper, who did not play this past week. I don't know her status, but not having Charity Looper is a big blow to the UCLA offense. So, honestly, I wouldn't say it's disappointing for UCLA, but it's big for LMU just because the West Coast Conference is becoming more of a Power 6 conference. I'm not trying to say that the West Coast Conference in volleyball is going to be huge, but it's like, you know what I mean. Like, this is probably a statement win for LMU, just because last year LMU had a lot of good they had a lot of wins, but the problem was none of them were statement wins. And by the time they got into conference, not being a Power 5 conference, it really hurt LMU as they eventually missed the NCAA tournament. They won, I want to say they won like 20 plus games, but unfortunately it didn't mean squat because they had not one standout win. Not one, as Cat Williams would say. So jumping over to Friday, we actually had a big upset, jumping over to Seattle, as Number 24, Pepperdine upset number 13, Washington in 4 sets. Pepperdine won the first set 25-18, lost the second 25-22, and then won the third and the fourth set 25-20 and 25-20 to upset the Huskies. This was a big win just because it was on the road, and more importantly, they barely outlasted Cal Poly the day before. So I really think it was quite a huge win for Pepperdine just because they had a lot of players step up. They had 4 players in double digits in terms of kills, as they were led by Grace Chillingworth, who had 15 kills, Meg Brown had 14 kills, Rachel Ahrens had 13 kills, and Emily Helmuth had 10 kills. As a team, Pepperdine hit 294 compared to Washington's 210, and Pepperdine outdug Washington 64-50 as they had 5 players in double digits in terms of digs, as Ahrens had 11 digs, Isabel Zayala had 11 digs to go along with her 46 assists, Kaylee Hames had 12 digs, Riley Patterson, the new libero, had 14 digs, and Chillingworth had 10 digs. And Pepperdine also outblocked Washington by a total of 13-10, which wasn't bad. And overall, I thought Pepperdine mostly outdid Washington in most of the statistics. They served fewer service errors, even though both teams had the same number of service aces. So overall, I thought Washington was... I had a feeling that Washington was going to struggle with this match just because they struggled the night before against Northwestern. And speaking of Northwestern, guess which team managed to pull off an upset as well? Northwestern, as they not only beat Pepperdine in the later matchup, they swept Pepperdine. This is a team that I was very surprised to see was actually doing decent. Now, Northwestern obviously is not the first choice of best teams in the Big Ten, but Northwestern, to me, really turned me over a new leaf, as Northwestern swept Pepperdine 25-19, 25-15, and 25-16. They didn't even allow Pepperdine to cross 20 one time, as Northwestern hit 396. And get this is the mind-blowing stat. Northwestern outdug Pepperdine 63-30. They doubled up Pepperdine's digs. That's when you know Northwestern meant business. Megan Miller had 27 digs in just a 3-set match. Imagine if the match went 5. She probably would have had like 60 on the night. So that's darn right impressive. And then Temi Thomas Alayara had 15 kills. She's probably the best player on Northwestern. And I've heard a lot of great things from the Big Ten Network. And then Hannah Lesiak had 12 kills to go along with her 12 digs as well. So overall, I don't know what happened with Pepperdine. They just did not look like themselves. I want to say, I don't want to assume this, but I think the win over Washington gave them a big head, because these are college athletes, and playing on back-to-back days is kind of tough, though Northwestern didn't have too many problems as well, as they actually played 2 nights. They actually played 2 matches in one day, as they played Cal Poly on Thursday, and they also played Washington on Thursday. So Pepperdine had the unfortunate honor of playing 2 matches in one day. So I also didn't know that Northwestern was undefeated going into this tournament until they wound up getting, I wouldn't say the brakes beaten off them, but they wound up losing to Washington, as it was kind of expected, just because Washington is good, while Northwestern hasn't really played the competition that Washington has played. So this was just quite the impressive win for Northwestern, and I really think that Northwestern has some promise this year. Now, this was another big upset on Saturday. I did not even think this was going to actually be a match until I saw this other team's record. So Pitt was hosting its Pitt tournament as they took on Towson. And this was a Saturday match. And for those of you that don't know, Towson is in the Maryland area. They're in the DMV area. But Towson really made their presence known, as they actually wound up beating Pitt, number 7 Pitt, mind you, in 4 sets. They dominated the first set 25-12. They nearly won the second set 25-23. Pitt won the third set 25-16. and Towson just rolled over Pitt in the fourth set, 25-18, as I didn't even know Towson was undefeated. We're all talking about Nebraska being undefeated and Texas being undefeated, but what about this team? Towson, from the CAA, they were undefeated, and they managed to pull off a big win over Pitt. Towson was led by Victoria Barrett, who had 16 kills, while Irbe Lazda had 14 kills. They ran a 6-2 offense as Katie McCracken had 22 assists while Sarah Jordan had 19 assists. As a team, Towson hit .275, and despite getting outdugged 41-33, they excelled in other categories such as blocking. This was the one that Pitt really struggled in, and I was very surprised Pitt had such a bad night in this category. Pitt had a grand total of 3 blocks compared to Towson's 16.5. That is alarming, to say the least. You cannot get outblocked 16.5 to 3. If you do, you're going to struggle. And it's quite interesting just because Pitt has so many talented hitters, like Courtney Bazario, who led the team in kills with 13. She even had a hitting percentage of .409. She was probably the most efficient hitter outside of Serena Gray, who had 7 kills, no hitting errors, for a hitting percentage of .583. And then Sabrina Starks also had 7 kills in the middle. She had a hitting percentage of .353. But overall, this was just it was, to say the least, not Pitt's night. I don't want to say this is a bad loss, but it's like, you lost at home, and this actually marked the first time in quite a while that Pitt lost to an unranked opponent at home. Like, you never get to see Pitt losing to an unranked opponent at home, just because they're fairly good against unranked opponents. Like, they're probably one of the top teams that do well at home against unranked teams. I didn't think that they would have such a bad night against Towson of all teams. I'm just really baffled. I'm baffled, to say the least. I just couldn't believe it. It's like, their caption said it best on Twitter. Not our night. It's like, yeah, no kidding. Oh my goodness. It's just mind-blowing, especially since they came off of a fairly good weekend where they beat BYU at BYU. I'm just confused at just what happened. It's like, I really don't know. I don't know how to describe this. I just think it's baffling, shocking. Just, it snapped a 42-game consecutive match win streak against unranked opponents. And this dated back all the way to 2020. So basically the shortened pandemic season. So once again, surprised to see Pitt losing that type of a matchup, but Towson is the real deal. Small school, unknown school in the DMV, but big and mighty win. Jumping over to the later matches of Saturday, this was probably a big win. This was number 11 Stanford taking down Minnesota, number 3 Minnesota, in the Big Ten Pac-12 Challenge. And let me just say, the Big Ten really flexed their muscle, as Penn State went a perfect 2-0. They beat Oregon and Stanford on Friday and Saturday, respectively. Minnesota outlasted Oregon on Friday. And then this matchup was I'm a little confused as to what the heck happened here, but I kind of am not surprised, because Stanford has been putting on some good matches. They have actually been improving, as Stanford beat the Gophers in 4 sets. They won the first set 25-20, won the second set 25-18, narrowly lost the third set 25-22, and just crushed Minnesota in set 4, 25-12. Stanford was led by Kendall Kipp, who had 17 kills. Elia Rubin, she's only a freshman, but she's a darn good freshman. Remember, she was on that Marymount team, that Marymount High School team, that went 35-0. Baffling, to say the least. She had 12 kills, as well as Katie Baird. Elia Rubin hit .286, and she had 11 digs. Elena Ogilvie had 13 digs, as well as Cami Minor, who had 10 digs to go along with her 43 assists. As a team, Stanford hit 269 compared to Minnesota's 102. Now, there were some categories that Stanford excelled in, such as digging, which they outdug Minnesota 54-47. They outblocked Minnesota, which is rare considering Minnesota's the better defensive team, as Stanford had 13 blocks compared to Minnesota's 5, which I don't know, man. Like, I'm just astounded to see Stanford just, like, I get it, Minnesota lost a few key pieces, but they were doing so good. And they were battle tested. And then to lose to Stanford on their home floor, I think this is more of a statement win for Stanford, though, because you all got to remember, Stanford lost to Minnesota in the NCAA tournament round of 32 last season, and I feel that might have been the motivating factor for the Cardinal. I feel that might have been the motivation for this match. That or Stanford really needed a big-time win, just because Stanford lost to number 1 Texas, and they lost to Penn State, which I think they could have won that one. They shouldn't have to reverse sweep Penn State. Though Penn State, I think, played a great match, not just on Friday, but on Saturday against Oregon as well. More on to them a little bit later. But overall, Stanford, they impressed me. And I thought, I'm really feeling more confident about them going forward. I really think this is the team to beat in the Pac-12. Washington has been off and on. UCLA is still trying to figure things out, and without Charity Looper, that could be looming large, depending on how long she's out for. And then you don't really have a clear-cut team right behind Washington. Oregon kind of is good, but they have been going 5 with teams that are unranked, such as Rice and Long Beach State. And then they also went 5 with Penn State, came out on the short end of the stick, and then they also went 4 with Minnesota. So for me, Stanford is my clear-cut winner to win the Pac-12. Minnesota, I think, is going to look at this loss and just use it as motivation to just not lose a match like this again. Like, you can learn more from a loss than you can from a win. I think Minnesota does have a good foundation, as Taylor Landfair led them in kills with 15. They only had one player crack double digits in terms of kills. The next kill leader had 8 kills, and that was Jenna Wenis. So overall, I think Minnesota, they're still a good team. I just think that this loss kind of hurt them quite a bit. And before I get into kind of the big matchup of the weekend, I also should make note that UNLV took down number 19 Kansas in 4 sets. Kayla, I don't know if you're still listening, but UNLV pulled off a huge win. I had a feeling UNLV was going to be good. Like I said, buy stock into them while you can. They definitely have a solid team. Them and Colorado State do have a lot of upside. It all depends on what happens in Mountain West Conference play. And then jumping over to the big upset. Well, I wouldn't call it the biggest upset, but the big match of the weekend, Georgia Tech versus Ohio State. We had Ohio State, number 8 Ohio State, taking down number 5 Georgia Tech in 4 sets. Keep in mind, Ohio State was 2-3, but prior to this game on Friday, Ohio State actually beat BYU in 4 sets, or actually in 3 sets. 3 sets 2 nights ago. So this was played on Sunday, and then Georgia Tech also swept BYU. I guess I should also make note of that. But Ohio State sweeping BYU was huge, just because BYU was number 10 at the time. And then beating Georgia Tech was even bigger, because that was Georgia Tech's first loss of the season. And it was also kind of a statement win. And this was another NCAA grudge match, as you also got to remember that Georgia Tech beat Ohio State in the Sweet 16 last season in the NCAA tournament. So for Ohio State to pick up that victory on its opponent's home floor a season after they lost to them in the NCAA tournament is huge. And I really think Ohio State is figuring it out. More on that later. As for the matchup between Georgia Tech and Ohio State, they're led by Gabby Gonzalez, who had 16 kills, while Emily Londot had 12 kills. Janasia Moore added 10 kills, and Riley Rader chipped in 8 kills. Both teams had 58 digs, and despite getting outblocked 10 to 8.5, Ohio State excelled in the match as they hit 226 compared to Georgia Tech's 152. I was really impressed with Ohio State. I really think that they're starting to get it together. The turning point of that match was kind of the fourth set. Now, this fourth set was quite interesting. The fourth set, Georgia Tech jumped out to an 18-13 lead, and everyone's probably thinking, okay, this is going to go 5. Georgia Tech has finally righted the ship. Prepare to go 5, Ohio State. Wrong. Ohio State actually came back from an 18-13 deficit to win the third set 25-23. So basically they closed out on a 12-5 run to win that set. I really am impressed with Ohio State, and I'm really starting to buy into the hype into them again. You have to remember, Jen Flynn Oldenburg scheduled really tough this year. That she scheduled the toughest competition out there. She scheduled 2 matches against one of the top 2 teams in the nation, Texas. Then they also lost a tough one to a very underrated San Diego team. And those are their first 3 matches. And everyone's probably thinking they're not going to win a game until Big Ten play. Nope. Last week they beat Louisville at Louisville in 4 sets. And then they pull off another big win against BYU. And then they beat Georgia Tech at Georgia Tech in the O'Keefe Gymnasium in 4 sets. And they swept BYU, by the way. Overall, I think Ohio State is doing great. And I think everyone kind of jumped the gun when it comes to the Buckeyes. I really think that's how scheduling tough is supposed to be. You schedule tough teams to get yourself better, because after non-conference play for Ohio State, they're partaking in probably the toughest conference in NCAA women's volleyball, the Big Ten. You got your Wisconsin, you got your Nebraskas. Penn State is improving by the week. You've also got your Minnesotas. They're still up there. You have Illinois, which is still in the top 25. Spoiler alert. Michigan's getting better, even though they haven't really beaten anyone too big. Michigan State has improved. Northwestern has done some great guns. This is a conference that could chew up any normal team that schedules normally. They schedule some guaranteed wins, some tough matches along the way. But Ohio State is scheduling all tough in non-conference play, and it's paying dividends going forward into conference play. Same can be said for Minnesota. They're scheduling tough as well. But back to Ohio State, this is a team that no one's going to want to face in Big Ten conference play. And if they do make the NCAA tournament, which they should, Ohio State is going to be a team that no one wants to play come the NCAA tournament, come November or December. Either way, this Ohio State team is going to be scary good come conference play, and it's all thanks to that tough schedule of theirs. So that is going to do it for the recap of week number 3. We're going to take one more quick little commercial break. When we come back, I will have the preview of week number 4, and then we'll also have my weekly awards to give out. So you are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
What's up, sports fans? Are you looking for the latest on Northern California sports? Then take a trip out west with me, your host, Gina G, on Reppin' the NorCal Sports, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'll be bringing it to you all the way live every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's always a packed show. I'll bring you everything Dynastic 49ers, the bite of the San Jose Sharks, torture of the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors that we still believe. Then take you across the bay to the rise and grind of the Oakland A's. I've got you covered on college ball from the Cal Bears to the Stanford Cardinal, so that no matter what, reppin' in NorCal sports is always reppin' the Bay. So if you bleed red and gold, or you're looking to keep an eye out west in them thar hills, don't miss me, Gina G, on reppin' in NorCal sports. Catch me every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'll have your fandom repped harder than a trio of defenders guarding Stephen Curry before his buzzer beater is Gucci.
And we are back with Set Point. Sorry if I had to go to that quick little commercial break. Just needed to take care of something. But either way, we are back here. So now we have to get into my awards for week number 3. So my team of the week for week 3 is, obviously everyone saw it on Twitter, it is Ohio State. So Ohio State, to me, I kind of blurbed about them quite a bit. But for me, them beating 2 top 10 teams is no joke. I really think Ohio State is finding their footing, and this is what happens when you schedule tough. I think that Ohio State is going to be a team that no one wants to face come Pac-12 play, or not Pac-12 play, Big Ten play, and I really think that this is going to be probably the team, it could be one of the teams to beat in the Big Ten, but now that they've gotten their sea legs when it comes to these tough opponents, I think Ohio State has what it takes to compete with anybody. And the wins are starting to pile up, and the tough scheduling, courtesy of Jen Flynn Oldenburg, is starting to pay dividends. Because sweeping BYU is no easy feat. And beating Georgia Tech at O'Keefe is also no feat as well. So the fact that Ohio State is doing great guns is no surprise to me. I think that everyone jumped the gun when it came to overreacting about them scheduling too tough. I now think that they're going to be in perfect shape come Big Ten play. So we'll see what happens with them going forward. But overall, I think that Ohio State is doing great, and that's why they are my team of the week. So let's go to our stat stuffers. So last week, I forgot to mention this little milestone alert. So we had one milestone alert from last week, or not last week, the last weekend, the previous weekend, and that was courtesy of Emily DeWalt of Texas State. She surpassed 5,000 assists a week ago against West Virginia in Hawaii in a 4-set win over the Mountaineers. DeWalt is actually only the third Texas State player to amass 5,000 assists. The other two are Christy Braun, which played in 1991 all the way to 1994, and Nikki Rose, who played from 1995 all the way to 1998. And DeWalt is actually only one of 2 active players with 5,000 plus assists, as the other one is LMA Powell of Washington. So the fact that she was able to surpass that is quite nice, and it's not easy being the setter. I think it's tough being a setter, and furthermore, it's basically being the quarterback of the team. You basically have to be perfect throughout most of the way, and you also have to find your hitters. And then the other stat stuffer or milestone alert person from this past weekend is Courtney Bazzario, who surpassed 1,000 kills in her college volleyball career. This occurred on Friday at home against American, and she also played some of her college volleyball career at Iowa, which, boy howdy, that's no easy feat. Nothing against Iowa, but it's like, playing there is tough, especially when you're in the same conference as like the Purdues, the Wisconsins, the Nebraskas, the Ohio States, the Minnesotas. That's tough right there, man. So the fact that she was able to amass nearly 1,000 kills within her time at Iowa is quite something. And I really think that, and I got to see her play during her youth career back at Orange Lutheran High School. She was a beast, and she also could set the ball quite nice. So the fact that she's 6'5" and she sets the ball well, I think she could play U.S. volleyball. We'll have to see what happens, but overall, Courtney Roserio's future in volleyball looks great, and she is kind of one of our stat stuffers. So last week I talked about how Corona Del Mar's girls volleyball team amassed over 90 digs in one match, in a 5-set match. Oh, my goodness, that was nothing compared to this matchup. So last week, Florida State and Creighton faced one another in a non-conference match, and it was quite something as both of these teams went the distance. They both went 5 sets as Creighton eventually wound up winning in 5, as this is the mind-blowing stat. The win and loss doesn't really matter to me, as this is the big stat right here. Florida State and Creighton combined for, get this, over 250 digs. To be exact, they amassed for 252 digs. Florida State had 123, while Creighton had 129. This is as a team, mind you. I don't know their full-on stats off the player stats right off the top of my head, but that's just crazy, dude. Over 100 digs. Keep in mind that the Big Ten last year only had 4 matchups which had a team surpass 90-plus digs, or 93 digs. Either way, that's amazing right there. And that's just high-level volleyball defensively. Both of these teams' hitting percentage weren't as high, hence the high dig count. And I really think that's just amazing. It's just great athletic volleyball. It's a battle of non-Power 5 conference team versus Power 5 conference team. The only difference is that the Power 5 conference team isn't ranked and the non-Power 5 conference team is ranked. So for Creighton to pull out that grindy of a win is quite amazing. The set scores were 25-19 Creighton, 19-25 Florida State, 29-27 Creighton, 25-27 Florida State, and 15-12 Creighton. So it's just quite amazing that Creighton just had them. They were just barely able to outlast them. Keep in mind that Creighton also barely lost to Nebraska, and then Creighton also survived against the University of Omaha or University of Nebraska Omaha. Either way, they had an eventful week as they went 5 sets in all 3 of their matches. It's just that the Florida State win was very impressive just because they had 129 digs. It was the matchup where everyone was digging everything, and I'm all for that. Those are like Madden numbers right there, in my opinion. So that is pretty much that for my stat stuffers. I have to get into the AVCA Top 25 for this week, as we had quite a bit of movement. We had some newcomers. We had only one team leaving, but here's your top 25 for September 12th. 25 through 21 consists of Illinois at 25, Arkansas, a newcomer in the top 25, at 24, Kansas at 23, Pepperdine at 22, and Western Kentucky at 21. 20 through 16 consists of Oregon at 20, Marquette at 19, Washington at 18, Creighton at 17, and Florida at 16. 15 through 11 consists of BYU at 15, Baylor at 14, Kentucky at 13, Pitt at 12, and Penn State at 11. 10 through 6 consists of Purdue at 10, Stanford at 9, San Diego at 8, Georgia Tech at 7, and Minnesota at 6. 5 through 1 consists of Ohio State at 5, Wisconsin at 4, Louisville at 3, Nebraska at 2, and your number 1 team, and your still number 1 team in the AVCA Women's Volleyball Coaches Poll is Texas. So Texas didn't really play anyone too noteworthy last weekend. Nebraska obviously played Creighton and Long Beach State. Louisville had themselves a decent weekend where they beat Purdue, which I think is an impressive win, hence Purdue going down a spot. Stanford, as we all know, they managed to pull off They pulled off a big win over Minnesota despite losing to Penn State. Penn State is what is really intriguing me. They really climbed up. They're up to number 11. I think Penn State is starting to become, as we say, back. I think Penn State is back. It's a little, I know everyone is probably jumping the gun when it comes to that, but I think Penn State is starting to figure it out quite nicely under their new head coach, and that is trouble for the Big Ten. It's also trouble for the rest of the nation, as I really think that Penn State can become a threat, and they're doing better than I anticipated, and that is huge for the Nittany Lions, especially since they're following the departure of longtime head coach Russ Rose. And then Ohio State, as we all know, they pulled off 2 big wins, defeating Georgia Tech and sweeping BYU. BYU was kind of the big fall, was one of the big fallers, as they fell all the way to 15, which I'm not too surprised. I mean, you're not really coming up big against the teams that you're supposed to come up big against. And then, like I said, Pitt kind of fell after their loss to Towson. They went from 7 all the way down to 12. And the newcomer, Arkansas, this is no surprise seeing Arkansas in the top 25. I really am high on Arkansas to me. I really think Arkansas can do big things when it comes to their team, when it comes to their season this year in the SEC, and I really think that the SEC is on notice, especially after that big 4-set win over Washington. And that Washington win is starting to prove quite crucial. This week they're going to have a little bit more of a challenge, but more on that later. I might as well. I'll get into that a little bit later. But that is basically your top 25 right there. Now to get to the teams that you should buy stock on when it comes to unranked Power 5 and unranked non-Power 5. So yeah, this is going to be a weekly thing, as well as my weekly awards and my weekly stat stuffers. We'll start with the unranked Power 5 conferences. So I had to basically do a little bit of shuffling just because Arkansas has officially graduated. They are officially in the top 25, and if you bought your stock onto them, congratulations. So one of my top 5 Power Conference teams that you should buy stock on that's unranked is Northwestern. Now, I know they didn't have too many big wins to start out, but sweeping and upsetting Pepperdine is no easy feat. They're currently 8-1 on their season, and their only loss was to Washington. They have a chance to increase their win total as they play DePaul, UIC, and Loyola of Chicago this weekend. They are looking for their first winning season since 2014. In 2018, they went 16-16. I really think Northwestern has what it takes to pull off they could possibly do it. I think Northwestern is getting better, and having Temi on their team is really going to really pay dividends for their team. I think Northwestern is underrated. Do I think they're going to knock off one of the power Big Ten teams? That remains to be seen. I think they could at least beat Illinois. I don't know if they'll beat like a top 10 team like Ohio State, Minnesota, Wisconsin, or Nebraska, but I think they're not going to be a team to sleep on. I think Northwestern is going to be a decent team to watch for, and if they do manage to make the NCAA tournament, I'll be impressed just because Northwestern is a good team, and they have my attention, that's for sure. So my next team in terms of unranked Power 5 conference teams you should buy stock on is UCLA. Now, UCLA is unranked, but you also got to remember, Charity Looper is not playing. She is out with something. She's out with injury. I don't know what the whereabouts of her injury is, but we don't know if she's even going to play this weekend. With Charity Looper, UCLA is a decent team. Without Charity Looper, they're still trying to figure out who their big hitter is without Mac May. This is going to be a big week for UCLA as they're heading to San Diego to play 2 San Diego schools. They're playing San Diego State on Thursday, and they're playing University of San Diego on Friday, as that's going to be a huge matchup right there. Last year, UCLA lost to the Toreros. This would be a huge win if UCLA were to beat San Diego. They need that win if they want to get back into the top 25. And they kind of need to start figuring it out soon, just because they play USC to start out Pac-12 play, and USC is starting to get better as well. I still have confidence in UCLA. I think UCLA can get it figured out, and I hope they get Charity Looper back sooner rather than later. Getting a fully healthy UCLA team is going to be huge going into Pac-12 play. Another unranked Power 5 conference team you should buy stock on is Mississippi State. Now, they did have a problem as they lost to Houston last week via reverse sweep, but it could be a humbling experience. They no longer have that pressure of being undefeated going into SEC play, as this week they play Michigan, which is a good test for them. I really think Mississippi State has to prove themselves. I really want to see them prove themselves, because once SEC play comes, they're going to have to prove themselves a whole lot more. They're going to have to prove themselves against the Kentuckys, the Floridas. Ole Miss is going to be up there. Arkansas, like I said, they're really doing good. Even South Carolina and Tennessee could give them trouble. So I'm interested to see what Mississippi State can do, and I still think you should buy stock into them. Another unranked Power 5 conference team you should buy stock on is Utah. Now, Utah started out ranked, and they kind of tumbled when they lost to Kansas. All of their losses have been to ranked teams. They lost to Purdue, they lost to San Diego recently in 5, and then they lost to Kansas. I think Utah is underrated. They can get back into the top 25. They play BYU at Utah in Salt Lake City. This is kind of their big moment to shine. BYU got swept by both Ohio State and Georgia Tech, which obviously that's tough for them, but this could be Utah's shining moment to try to get back into the top 25. They kind of need all the matches they can get, because they start out Pac-12 play against Colorado, which is another rival of theirs. And they also have Utah State as a rival as well. For me, I think Utah winning against BYU is more important, just because BYU is definitely a great team. And I get it, Utah is still trying to figure things out without Danny Drews, but for me, I think that Utah has to figure it out sooner rather than later, just because the Pac-12 is starting to figure it out sooner rather than later themselves. Like UCLA, they're still trying to find that big-time hitter. They're trying to find that new Danny Drews. But I think Utah is still a talented team. I really think that you should still buy stock into them. Now that they're unranked, buy stock into them. Make sure you keep on the hype train of them. Don't let up on them. I think that they have potential. And then my last Power 5 team that is unranked that you should buy stock into is Florida State. Now, I know I've gone gaga over Florida State, but I have every right to. Florida State returns a good chunk of their players from last year. They almost took down Creighton. They also lost to a good Cincinnati team, so they don't really have any bad losses. Florida State, obviously, they're right there when it comes to being ranked. They have a chance to prove themselves tomorrow, as of this recording, this is Monday, but they have a chance to prove themselves against Florida in Gainesville at the Swamp tomorrow against Florida. Last year, the Seminoles beat the Gators, which I think was the victory that really keyed a huge push into the ACC. I really think Florida State can beat Florida. I think that the Gators are still trying to figure things out. They've had their ups and downs. They lost to the Stanford. They couldn't really pull out a win over Minnesota. I think Florida State has that potential. Like I said, they are a good team. The Noles are a good team. While the Gators' losses haven't been too terrible, their wins have kind of been they've kind of left a little bit to be desired when it comes to their wins. They had a little bit of trouble against North Florida. They also had a little bit of trouble with East Tennessee. And then their wins are against Virginia, Georgia Southern, Florida Gulf Coast, and VCU. This is also kind of Florida's chance to prove themselves that they deserve to be ranked. But I don't know. I think Florida State has a good chance. I think if Florida State comes into the match with an underdog mentality and they just block out the outside noise and the hype, this matchup could go in favor of the Noles. I would not be surprised if Florida State won. Definitely keep buying your stock on the Noles, especially before the ACC play starts. I really think that Florida State is for real. And if you don't believe me, Just look at how they were able to sweep Omaha. Some people were saying that Omaha is a dangerous team because how they pushed Nebraska last year. Well, that was last year. This year, Omaha doesn't have too many bad losses. They managed to push Creighton to 5, but against Florida State, they got swept. Though the sets were closer than expected. They were close. But Florida State swept them, and it's like, I'm more confident in Florida State. I think Florida State gives me the confidence to say, I can be behind Florida State through ACC play. Buy stock into them, definitely do. Now let's jump into the non-Power 5 conference teams that are unranked that you should buy stock on. I didn't really have a number 5. I kind of had to share number 5 and 4 with 2 teams. My honorable mention is Omaha. I think Omaha, University of Nebraska, Omaha, could give the Summit League some trouble, as you have your South Dakota, you have your Denver, you have your UMKC. Those are your teams that are kind of, I wouldn't say the teams to be in the conference, but I really think that I think Nebraska-Omaha can really turn some heads. I have always seen Nebraska-Omaha as an underrated team in that conference. I think they just have to put it all together. As for the true number 5 and number 4, that just happens to be Colorado State and UNLV. I put these two together just because, well, they're in the same conference as one another. They're in the Mountain West Conference. Colorado State plays Colorado this week. This is a real good chance for the Rams to prove themselves. While UNLV, as I just mentioned, they took down Kansas in 4 sets. Their only loss was to Miami, which is not a bad loss. I think obviously you don't want to lose, but at the same time, it's not too bad because Miami is pretty darn good. If they take that 3rd set, they're able to take that 3rd set, 4th set. They don't even need to go to a 5th set. But I really think that loss to Miami is no big deal. UNLV doesn't really get the biggest test as they play Idaho State, Southern Utah, and Utah Tech. But come next week, guess who they open up conference play against? That's right, Colorado State. So right out the gate, the Rebels and the Rams face one another. And for Colorado State, they're going to obviously be more battle-tested due to Colorado being a Power 5 conference opponent. And obviously Colorado has that rivalry with Colorado State. But I think that you can't go wrong with buying stock into UNLV or Colorado State. And then my other team to buy stock into is Long Beach State. I know they had a rough weekend against Nebraska. They got swept. But this team has a lot of upside to its roster. This week they are away and home against Loyola Marymount, the team that beat UCLA. So my thing is for Long Beach State is a win or 2 can go a long way. Just because that if UCLA does so happens to make the NCAA tournament, or they just so happen to win another game, sorry for the voice crack, I think that the win over LMU is going to prove pivotal. I wish Long Beach State had scheduled UCLA like they have done in the past, but I digress on that. I think this week is going to be a huge week for Long Beach State just because Friday they are at LMU, and then Saturday they are at the Pyramid in Long Beach. I feel Long Beach State can at least win one of these matches. They have to at least win one match against LMU. I feel a win in the bones of Long Beach State. I think they can do so. We'll see what happens as next week they open up conference play. I want to say they open up conference play against Cal Poly. I'm not entirely certain. Let me just double check it. Yes, they do. So yes, Long Beach State plays Cal Poly to open up Big West conference play next Friday. So it'll be interesting to see how the Beach does against LMU. And then my second best team to buy my second best non-Power 5 conference team that's unranked that you should buy stock on is Rice. Remember, Rice only has 1 loss on the season. It's a 5-set loss to Oregon. This team has a chance to prove themselves as a big threat as they play Creighton and a sneaky good Kansas State team. I really think that this is going to prove themselves. This weekend is kind of their big test. They are at home. They play Creighton. They play Kansas State. If they take 2 out of 2, they're for sure going to be ranked, or at least close to knocking on the door, because they are receiving votes in the AVCA coaches poll. The thing is that Rice doesn't get a whole lot of credit just because they're in the shadow of Western Kentucky. I'm going to be interested to see how Rice does, especially when they play Baylor. That's going to be a really interesting matchup. It's like right smack dab in the middle of conference. So they play conference, and then poof, once they're in the midway portion of their conference or the thick of their conference schedule, they're going to eventually run into Baylor, and that'll be a great matchup. But this weekend they have Creighton, which obviously, I think Creighton is human. Obviously going 5 with Nebraska, Omaha, Florida State, and Nebraska means they're going to have some tired legs, but Norris Sis is no joke. And then they also have other talented players. Their setter, Kendra Waite, is a beast. I think she is one of the top setters in the Big East Conference, but I digress on that. And then Kansas State is also sneaky good. They don't have too many... I don't think they have any bad losses. I think that Kansas State could make a push in the Big 12, but against like Texas, Baylor, and Kansas, that remains to be seen. And then the number 1 team from the non-Power 5 conference unranked teams list that you should buy stock into is Towson. Now, Towson, I admit, I didn't know that Towson was undefeated. I'm going to own up to that. Towson... I apologize to Towson fans. I did not know Towson was undefeated. And that win over Pitt really is amazing. This week, unlike all the other conferences, Towson actually gets Colonial Athletic Association conference play underway, as they actually play Hampton, which, ironically enough, is undefeated as well. The differences between Hampton and Towson is that Hampton has played only 3 matches, and I highly doubt they've beaten anyone of Towson's Excalibur. I'm going to be really interested to see how Towson does. I think Towson could run through their conference. I'm not trying to say crown them right away or they're going to be undefeated come the NCAA tournament, but Towson looks good, man. Like, to beat Pitt on the road, that's just freaking amazing. And I don't think Pitt was missing anybody, so I don't think there's any excuse for Pitt. Like, you're at home, you have Courtney Vazario, you have Serena Gray, you have Juliana Dalton, Rachel Fairbanks, Valeria Vasquez-Gomez. You get the point. Towson's win over Pitt was no fluke. End of discussion. Towson, definitely buy stock into. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. So that is that for my teams you should buy stock into. Before we get out of here, we gotta go over the sneaky good, notable, and definitely noteworthy matchups for this week. We'll start with the sneaky good matchups, starting from earliest to latest. So on Tuesday, we have number 21 Western Kentucky at Tennessee. Definitely a good matchup just because it's a good test for Tennessee, and Western Kentucky gets to take on its SEC opponent not named Kentucky. I think it's going to be a good matchup. It's a good little test run for Tennessee to see where they're at. I think Tennessee has what it takes to win this matchup, but they're going to actually have to go on the court and win. They lost quite a bit to graduation last year and quite a bit to the transfer portal, but I think with Natalie Hayward still in the program, I think Tennessee still has a good shot. Also on Tuesday, we have the very rare unranked matchup that doesn't involve Long Beach State. Dayton at Ball State. So both of these teams made the NCAA tournament last year and lost in the round of 32. For Dayton, they've kind of had their up and down season, but I think this is a good chance to prove themselves. Ball State is not bad. I think Ball State is very decent this year. They only have 1 loss, and that was to Mississippi State, so Ball State is another team you could probably buy stock into. You can't go wrong with that. I think Ball State, Dayton is an underrated, unranked matchup right there. Jumping over to Friday, we have number 22 Pepperdine versus Washington State at Minnesota. I think this is going to be a great matchup. This is kind of going to be Washington State's test, just because if they can't beat Pepperdine, they're not going to have any shot against Minnesota. Let's get that out of the way. I think Washington State is underrated. I think that's another team you could buy stock into while they're unranked. I just think that Washington State is still going to need this weekend to try to figure out the final kinks before Pac-12 play. And then for Pepperdine, this is kind of their chance to just dust off that ugly loss to Northwestern and to eventually get back on track against the Cougars. Next matchup in terms of sneaky good matchups is Tennessee at number 12 Pitt on Friday. So, yeah, another Power 5 versus Power 5 conference. Last year, these two teams went the distance with Pitt coming out on top. I don't know how good Tennessee is going to be when it comes to facing Pitt, but I know this. Pitt's not going to lose to Tennessee. If they do, then I'm going to eat crow, but I expect a good matchup from these two. Like I said, this is Tennessee's big week to try to prove themselves. If they don't prove themselves against Western Kentucky, they have to prove themselves against either Pitt or Ohio State. Otherwise, it's not going to be good times for them going into SEC play. Also on Friday, we have Texas A&M at Western Kentucky. So I haven't really talked a whole lot about Texas A&M. They have decent wins, but their only losses have been at the hands of San Diego and Pitt. So for the Aggies, this is kind of their chance to try to put themselves on the map in terms of the SEC. They have not been on the map in terms of the SEC ever since 2019 when they had such a darn good team. Now is their chance to try to prove themselves, to prove to me that they deserve the recognition that they deserve. And I said deserve a lot of times. For Western Kentucky, this is another good test for them. I think it's another good SEC test, and it's kind of a good barometer of where they're at. Do they really deserve to be ranked 21? Do they deserve to be ranked a little bit higher? Do they not deserve to be ranked? Do they deserve to still be in the top 20? Or in terms of the 20 through 25 spots? That is kind of the million-dollar question for Western Kentucky. I like how they're being tested early, though. I don't think these are bad matchups in terms of the SEC, so I really like this matchup right here. Jumping over to Saturday, we have number 17 Creighton at versus Kansas State at Rice. So Kansas State, much like Rice, they have a chance to prove themselves. They face Creighton. I really think Creighton is obviously going to win, but Kansas State, don't sleep on them. I really think Kansas State does have a good roster. They have shown it early on. They don't have too many bad losses. I think Kansas State can make noise in the Big 12. I just don't think they're going to be a part of that. I'd say probably third is their ceiling. Third place is their ceiling unless they beat Baylor both times, but I think Kansas State is decent. Also on Saturday, we have Washington State at number 6 Minnesota. Again, this is going to be another uphill climb for Washington State, but it's good because once they get into Pac-12 play, that's when they know it's really going to start to get real. Minnesota knows that they have to bounce back against this one and their previous match prior to this. And then closing out the sneaky good matchups, we have number 20 Oregon at Miami on Sunday. So this is Miami's chance to prove that they deserve to be ranked, and this is Oregon's chance to prove that they don't need to go 5 sets with teams that are not unranked, or that are not ranked. I think Oregon has potential. Obviously, losing to Penn State and Minnesota is no joke, but they gave them all that they can handle. So we'll see what happens with the Ducks going forward. For the notable matchups, we have most of these are going to be ranked on ranked. For the notable matchups, we have number 7, starting on Thursday, we have number 7 Georgia Tech versus number 24 Arkansas. Arkansas's first test, and Georgia Tech's chance to get back on track. We'll see what happens. Number 22 Pepperdine at number 6 Minnesota. This is the big chance for Pepperdine to pull off another top 10 win. Minnesota is kind of licking its wounds against Stanford, or from the loss against Stanford. Pepperdine is also kind of licking its wounds from the loss against Northwestern. But this is kind of a big test to see if that loss was nothing more than a fluke, or if Northwestern is actually really good. Or maybe it's because Pepperdine just was a little too high off their win over Washington. Either way, we have a lot of storylines in that match. Also on Thursday, we have number 15 BYU at Utah. The holy war here. like I said, Utah's biggest chance to prove themselves that they deserve to be ranked. And this is also going to be a big matchup for BYU. This is going to show if BYU can actually still win the West Coast Conference, or if they're going to be playing second or third banana, because some people are saying that BYU is the third best team in the West Coast Conference. I don't know about that, but all I know is that San Diego is the real deal. That's the tweet right there. That's the T right there. Speaking of San Diego, UCLA at number 8 San Diego is on Friday. UCLA's chance to prove themselves. Again, I don't know the whereabouts of Charity Looper, but San Diego is going to come ready and willing. Jumping over to Saturday, in terms of the notable matchups, number 25 Illinois at number 19 Marquette is also another matchup to watch for. Good little lower ranked on ranked matchup, as Illinois is just clinging onto a top 25 spot while Marquette is climbing up the ranks. I really want to see if Marquette can win this matchup. It'll be interesting to see if the team from Wisconsin can beat the team from Chicago, or the team from Illinois. It's kind of like the Bears and the Packers, except there's no ownage. Anyway, jumping over to Sunday, we have number 17 Creighton at Rice. Just like Kansas State, it's Rice's chance to prove themselves. Rice could definitely prove themselves with a win, and even if they take Creighton to 5, that's still quite impressive. And then closing out, jumping back to the Saturday matchups, we have Ball State at number 10 Purdue. So this barely just made my notable matchups. I almost want to put it in the sneaky good matchups, but I decided to jump it up a little bit. This is an in-state rivalry, and I love in-state rivalries. Ball State is having a decent season, but so is Purdue. Everyone thought Purdue was going to take a major step back without Caitlin Newton. It's the exact opposite. Purdue is actually taking a step forward. Their only loss was to Louisville, and then Ball State's only loss was to a talented Mississippi State team. This is the chance for both these teams to prove where they're at in terms of their seasons going into conference play. And then the definitely worth noting matchups. We'll start with the... No, we'll not go. We won't go to the match of the week. Or should we? I don't even know what match of the week is going to be. I think it could be any of these. I feel match of the week could be number 3 Louisville versus number 9 Stanford. You also can't go wrong with this Tuesday matchup. As of right now, we are still on Monday of this recording. Number 9 Stanford at number 2 Nebraska. This is going to be a fun matchup right here. Last year, Stanford beat Nebraska. Now we're going to see if Nebraska can enact its revenge. This could also be another test for the Cardinal, as this is a big-time opponent right here. Nebraska is loaded all over the place. Even their underclassmen are stepping up, my dudes. I really think that Stanford is going to have a big test, especially when they're playing in Lincoln. That is no easy place to play at. But like I mentioned, the fans are not hostile. They're loud, they're spirited, they love their volleyball. Also on Tuesday, as I just mentioned in my teams to buy stock into, Florida State at number 16 Florida. I have this in the definitely worth noting category just because it's another in-state rivalry. I love in-state rivalries. This is the Florida State team that beat Florida last year. Can they do it again? I definitely think so. Can Florida prove themselves? I definitely think so. I would not be surprised if this one went 5. I really think Florida State has a good shot at beating the Gators, but Florida is still as good as advertised. Now this matchup is actually going to be moved to ESPN, and it's going to be televised nationally, so congratulations to number 3 Louisville at number 13 Kentucky. Great, another in-state rivalry, and this is one of the better rivalries in college entirely. I really think that Louisville-Kentucky is a great in-state rivalry, and I'm excited to see what these two can do. I feel that this could go either way. This is a big test for both teams, as this will see where Louisville's at following their loss to Ohio State, though they bounced back really well in their little tournament last week. And then Kentucky, obviously losing to Wisconsin was tough. They lost to Wisconsin in straight sets. But I think Kentucky is still a good team to watch for, and this is one of the top rivalries, according to my good friend Terry Brown, a friend of the show and a host of Cats Talk Wednesdays. That's a Wednesday matchup, by the way. And jumping over to Friday, we have number 16 Florida at number 4 Wisconsin at the Kohl Center. So it's not going to be played in the standard gymnasium that Wisconsin plays in. They're going to be playing at the Kohl Center, which is huge. For me, this is probably the most unorthodox matchup to watch for, but I think it's a great matchup. This is another big test for Florida. I think the Gators can maybe hang tough with Wisconsin. I wouldn't bet on it, but I feel Wisconsin is still trying to figure things out. They did obviously sweep Kentucky, and they also swept High Point, but that's not really the point. The point is that we're going to see how they truly are following their loss to Baylor. But for me, Wisconsin is kind of an early pick for this game, but don't count out Florida. Florida is still a decent team, even though they have their inconsistencies. So now we get on into the Saturday matchup. The big Saturday matchup to watch for is number 3 Louisville at number 9 Stanford. So after Louisville plays their little rivalry matchup against Kentucky, they're hitting the road to Stanford to take on the Cardinal at Maples Pavilion. I really think this is going to be a great matchup. I think Louisville is still good as advertised. Stanford, depending on how they do against Nebraska, is also going to get another big matchup. They're facing the number 3 and number 2 team in the nation. My goodness. This is why I have Stanford as my favorite to win the Pac-12. If they actually win one, if not both of these matchups, they are my lock. And I really think people should start getting on the Stanford hype train because it's about to take off momentarily. And then jumping over to Sunday, this was originally my match of the week. Unfortunately, Pitt kind of fell down a little. Number 5 Ohio State at number 12 Pitt. I really think Ohio State is playing a lot of good, tough matches. Playing against Pitt at Pitt is going to be another big challenge. Can they beat another ACC opponent at its home gymnasium? They're 2 for 2 against Louisville and Georgia Tech. Now they're eyeballing Pitt. I think Ohio State can do it. I think Ohio State has gotten everything figured out for the most part. I think Ohio State's tough schedule is paying dividends, and more importantly, I think this is kind of where we see Ohio State truly flourish. And then also on Sunday, we have number 2 Nebraska at number 13 Kentucky. Huge matchup right here. I feel this is one of the more interesting matchups just because it's another Big Ten versus SEC rivalry. Oh, not a rivalry, but it's still a Big Ten versus SEC matchup. I really think the Wildcats have a lot to prove this week against Louisville and against Nebraska. Much like Stanford, they're playing the number 2 and number 3 team in the nation. It's going to be a real barn burner for them. And to have both of their matchups at home really should be quite the honor for Kentucky. I think Kentucky definitely is going to win the SEC. They'll definitely have me thinking that for sure if they win one, if not both of these matchups. I really think Kentucky is picking up the pieces following the Skinner girls' departure, Maddie and Avery. But I really think that Kentucky is doing great guns this season. I think they don't get enough credit for scheduling tough. They obviously lost to a tough Marquette team, but we all know how good Marquette is. And then they bounced back big time last week against USC, which I guess is a decent win. Creighton was the big win because, like I said, third set they laid down the wood. And then obviously they beat UNI, but I don't care. But either way, I think Kentucky has a lot to prove this week. It's a big test for them. And that's pretty much that when it comes to my matchups to watch for. There are probably going to be more matches to watch for, or at least some sneaky good matchups. But that is that for my matches to watch for. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for Set Point. Without any further delay, let's drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Set Point. I hope you all enjoyed today's show. I apologize if this nearly went 2 hours again. I don't mean for these episodes to go 2 hours, I promise you. There will be timestamps as I'm recording this in advance. I will add the timestamps once I get done editing this. Thank you to everyone that tuned in. I appreciate you all tuned in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you listen on anytime, any place, anywhere, I appreciate you. Shout out to the chat room. Shout out to Courtney Harden, Cale Henderson, Larry B, and Davidson Crooks for popping in and saying hello. I appreciate you all tuning in. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You'll have yourself a great rest of the week. Enjoy the volleyball action. I forgot to mention this. the Durango tournament in high school volleyball is this weekend as well, as the top teams in the nation are about to flock out and strut their stuff. I'm really excited for the Durango tournament. It's always a competitive tournament. I think anyone could win it just because there's a lot of parity going on in high school volleyball, especially in Southern California. You'll have to see my recap on that as the weekend goes by. Until then, enjoy the weekend. I will see you all Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Also be on the lookout for the 3-year anniversary of Set Point. That's on the horizon as well. Keep on the lookout for that. Take care, and I'll see you Friday. Peace!